All right, listener, buckle up, because today we are diving deep into one of the most incendiary texts to come out of second-wave feminism,
Oh, yeah.
Valerie Solanas' S.C.U.M. Manifesto.
Definitely a controversial one.
Published in 1968, this thing didn't hold back.
No, did not.
And its radical viewpoints are still pretty shocking.
Even today, yeah.
But that's exactly why we're here.
Right.
Our goal isn't to, endorse or condemn Solanas' ideas,
Of course not.
but to understand the context.
Yeah, the historical context that fueled them.
And see if they have any relevance in the 21st century.
For sure.
So let's just jump right in.
Okay.
What exactly is S.C.U.M?
Well, S.C.U.M stands for the Society for Cutting Up Men,
Wow. Okay. So,
which kind of gives you a pretty good idea where she's coming from.
yeah, no kidding. It's
Right off the bat.
definitely not subtle.
Not at all.
The opening lines are especially striking.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
She talks about eliminating everything in society that's not relevant to women.
Right, and it's interesting how she defines relevance. Well, her whole argument rests on this idea that men are biologically deficient.
Oh, wow.
A walking abortion, as she puts it.
Wow.
She claims that the Y chromosome is an incomplete X chromosome,
Okay.
which leads to all sorts of emotional and psychological limitations in men.
So according to Solanas, this biological deficiency makes men incapable of genuine emotion
Right.
and therefore unable to really contribute anything meaningful to society.
That's her argument, yes.
Wow.
And she doesn't stop there.
Oh, no.
She links this deficiency to a whole list of societal ills.
Like what?
Oh, you name it. War, poverty, marriage, fatherhood. She even blames men for ugliness,
Wait, really?
like a complete indictment of men and their whole role in shaping the world.
But how does she actually connect these societal issues to her critique of male psychology?
It's interesting, right? For
Yeah.
instance, she describes money as a love substitute for men, implying that they chase wealth because of some deep emotional void.
So even something like economic inequality, which we think of as a systemic issue, is for Solanas rooted in these individual male deficiencies.
That's a great observation, and it gets to the heart of her argument.
Okay.
It seems like she really believes these societal structures aren't just flawed,
Right.
but that they're actually symptoms of a deeper inherent flaw in men themselves.
So is she critiquing men, or is she critiquing the systems that she believes they inevitably create?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
I guess so.
It's almost like she's holding up a mirror to these systems.
Showing how deep they run.
Exactly.
But let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Let's move from this critique of men to her vision for change.
Very.
So who is this S.C.U. woman that Solanas champions?
The S.C.U.M woman is her ideal.
Okay.
A woman who has totally rejected male influence
Hmm.
and embraces dominance and independence.
Okay.
She contrasts this with the daddy's girl archetype,
Right.
who she sees as upholding the whole patriarchal structure through her dependence on men.
So instead of arguing for equality within the existing system,
Right.
Solanas is proposing like a complete upheaval of gender roles.
Pretty much, yeah.
What are the implications of these contrasting archetypes?
I mean, both psychologically and sociologically. It's a fascinating question for sure.
It is.
By setting these two figures against each other,
Okay.
she really challenges traditional ideas about femininity
Right.
and makes us think about how women are socialized into these subservient roles.
It makes you wonder if those constructs, even if we reject the extremes, still have relevance today.
Definitely something to consider.
So how does Solanas envision these S.C.U.M women actually making this change happen?
Right. Getting down to the practicalities.
Because the manifesto outlines a pretty shocking plan of action, right?
It does indeed.
Like, what's in this plan?
Well, she calls for women to drop out of the workforce,
Really?
engage in economic sabotage, and even embrace violence as a means of dismantling the male-dominated system.
This call for violence has got to be the most controversial part of the manifesto.
Without a doubt.
It makes you think about how far you're willing to go for social change.
Absolutely.
Most feminist movements have kind of distanced themselves from this aspect.
Yeah, they have.
But it's important to understand the context for her radicalism.
Absolutely.
She saw the system as totally corrupt and basically resistant to change.
Right.
So did she believe violence was the only way to achieve true liberation?
Or at least the threat of it.
It's a pretty provocative and unsettling idea.
Yeah, sure.
It challenges us to rethink our conventional approaches to social change.
No question about it.
But her plan isn't all brute force.
No.
She also saw technology as a potential liberator for women.
Especially in areas like reproduction and automation.
It's interesting how she envisioned technology aligning with feminist goals.
Right.
She predicted things like sperm banks,
Yeah.
and even the elimination of male births through genetic engineering.
Wow.
Some of her ideas were radical for their time,
Totally.
but they kind of foreshadow modern conversations.
About reproductive rights and technology.
It makes you wonder how her views on technology connect with modern feminist movements
Especially those that are focused on using technology.
to challenge gender norms and empower women.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Her overall message is extreme,
No doubt.
but there are elements that connect with current feminist concerns.
For sure.
And maybe exploring those connections can help us understand why the manifesto is still relevant today.
Even though a lot of feminists have rejected its radicalism.
Exactly. It's a complicated legacy.
Very much so.
We've been talking about Solanas' critique of men and her vision for a world ruled by S.C.U.M women.
Right.
But I think what's really interesting is her concept of a female utopia.
Yeah.
This isn't just about, like, flipping the power structure.
No.
It's about creating something totally new.
Exactly. And this utopian vision is tied to her views on technology.
How so?
Well, she believed that eliminating men, along with the money system,
Okay.
would lead to this kind of technological paradise,
So paradise.
where automation would take care of everyone's needs, freeing up women to pursue intellectual and creative stuff.
So it's like a post-scarcity society,
Right.
where all the things that she sees as holding women back
Economic dependence,
Yeah.
domestic labor, the burdens of reproduction,
are just gone.
eradicated by technology.
Even if we ignore the whole eliminating men thing,
Yeah,
is this utopia really that different from other utopian ideals?
it's a good question.
Like the pursuit of a world without scarcity or conflict?
Right.
Isn't that a pretty common theme?
It is.
But Solanas takes it further.
Oh, yeah, she does.
She wants to reimagine the very foundation of human existence.
Starting with gender.
She even imagines a future where there are no more male births.
Through genetic engineering.
That's pretty radical.
It is. It shows how far she was willing to go.
To dismantle patriarchy.
Which is why her legacy is so complex.
It's been embraced by some radical feminist groups,
Right.
but mainstream feminism has mostly rejected it.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Is it just the extremity of her proposals?
I mean, that's definitely part of it.
Or is there something more?
It's a bunch of factors, I think.
Like what?
Well, the call for violence and eliminating men,
Right.
that's hard to reconcile with most feminist goals.
Which are usually about equality within existing systems.
Exactly. This is not about incremental change
No, it's a complete demolition.
of the status quo.
Plus, her essentialist view of gender
The idea that men are inherently flawed and women are superior,
clashes with the idea of gender as a social construct.
which has become a central idea in feminist thought.
So some feminists might agree with her critique of patriarchy.
But they wouldn't necessarily agree that men are biologically programmed to be oppressors.
Right.
And there's another element that makes the manifesto controversial.
What's that?
It's Solanas' anger.
Her anger.
It's so raw and unfiltered.
Kind of apologetic.
Yeah, and that can be off-putting.
Especially for people who want a more hopeful approach to social change.
Right.
But isn't anger a valid response to oppression?
Of course it is.
Could you argue that the S.C.U.M manifesto, by expressing that rage so openly,
Yeah.
helped pave the way for other radical feminist voices?
That's a really interesting point.
It was like she broke a taboo.
By being so forceful,
Even if her solutions were unacceptable.
it forced people to acknowledge the anger fueling some feminist perspectives.
And that created space for other feminists to express their own anger,
Maybe in less extreme ways.
but still powerful.
Absolutely.
And that leads us to another interesting aspect of the manifesto.
What's that?
Solanas' analysis of male psychology.
Right.
She doesn't exactly paint a flattering picture.
No, she does not.
She describes men as driven by insecurity
And a need to overcompensate?
because of their perceived deficiencies.
Okay.
It's a pretty different picture from the traditional image of masculinity.
The strong, silent type.
But could there be some truth to her observations?
Possibly.
We've talked about how social structures influence behavior.
Right.
Is it possible that the expectations placed on men?
Lead to those very insecurities that Solanas described.
That's a good question.
Think about her concept of the daddy's girl.
Okay.
It's not just about women seeking approval from men.
Right.
It's about men needing to be seen as providers and protectors.
So both men and women are trapped.
In a way, yes.
So if men are also victims of these expectations?
Does eliminating them also liberate them?
It's a strange idea.
It is. It speaks to the complexity of the manifesto.
On one hand, she's super critical of men.
Blaming them for everything.
But on the other hand,
She sees them as victims of their biology.
and social conditioning.
Right.
So she's condemning them and pitying them at the same time.
That's what makes it so thought-provoking.
It makes you think about how even people who benefit from a system can be harmed by it.
That's a key point.
The S.C.U.M. Manifesto isn't just about hating men
It's about understanding the systems of power
that shape our behavior.
and make us act against our own best interests.
So we've talked about her critique of men,
And her vision for a female utopia?
but to really get the radical nature of this manifesto, we have to look at how she plans to make this happen.
Her tactics.
It's one thing to theorize,
Right.
but how does she see this playing out in real life?
That's where her plan of action comes in.
And it's definitely the most controversial part.
Oh, sure.
Solanas advocates for this multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
Economic sabotage, targeted violence, and a complete withdrawal from the male-dominated system.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. So let's start with the economic sabotage.
Right.
What does that even look like?
She suggests women basically infiltrate the workforce
Okay.
and then disrupt it from within.
From within.
Like a coordinated effort to unravel the whole economic system.
Which she sees as perpetuating male dominance.
Exactly.
So you've got like S.C.U.M. saleswomen giving away merchandise.
Right.
S.C.U.M. telephone operators making free calls.
S.C.U.M. factory workers sabotaging production.
It's like guerrilla warfare, but on the economic front.
Precisely.
And then on top of that.
She also calls for more direct action.
Like what?
Property destruction. And, as we said before, acts of violence against men.
This is where it gets really tough.
Yeah.
A lot of social movements believe in non-violent resistance.
Right.
But Solanas sees violence as necessary for radical change.
How do we reconcile that with feminist thought?
It's a hard question.
That is.
Most feminists have rejected violence.
Absolutely.
But we have to remember the context.
She saw the system as so entrenched
So resistant to change.
that she thought more drastic measures were needed.
Like the only way out was to destroy it completely.
And that brings us to the last part of her plan,
Withdrawal.
creating a separate, female-centered society.
This idea of separatism.
Has come up in feminism before.
But Solanas takes it to the extreme.
Women cutting all ties with men.
Building their own communities.
And ultimately creating a new world.
Based on their own values.
It's like she's saying, if we can't fix it, we'll start over.
But is separatism really a viable strategy?
That's debatable.
It sounds good in theory.
A space free from oppression.
But what about isolation?
Sustainability.
And the risk of just recreating the same power dynamics.
All valid concern.
It makes you think about the different ways to approach social change.
Dismantling existing structures.
Building new ones.
Or transforming them from within.
That's what's so powerful about the S.C.U.M. Manifesto.
It makes us confront these questions.
Challenge our assumptions.
And imagine a different world.
Well, our deep dive into the S.C.U.M. Manifesto has been quite a journey.
Yeah, it has.
We've encountered some shocking language.
Controversial proposals.
And a vision for the future that's both exciting and disturbing.
We've explored Solanas' critique of men.
Her belief in women.
And her radical vision for a transformed world.
We may not agree with everything she said.
Of course not.
But we can't deny the power of her words.
Her call to action.
And the lasting impact of her ideas.
The S.C.U.M. Manifesto is a challenge.
A reminder that the fight for equality continues.
It pushes us to question everything.
To push boundaries.
And to imagine a world beyond the status quo.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
we'll leave you with this.
What parts of Solanas' vision resonate with you?
What makes you uncomfortable?
And what can we learn from this radical text?
Even as we grapple with its complexities and contradictions.
Thanks for joining us.